So please look at my colleague, not directly to the camera.
Okay, can I start? Yeah. Okay, my name is Alan and I'm 53 years old. I was born in Dublin in Ireland, but my family moved to England when I was 8 and we lived in Cambridge. Now, I went to university in England and worked in England until I was 40. When I was 40, I got divorced, and also the job I was doing, I wasn't particularly happy. I was working at a business with my brother-in-law. So I decided that it would be interesting to do something different. As I said, I was bored with England and I wanted a change of life. So I'd heard that if you'd studied a TEFL course, which is teaching English as a foreign language, you have opportunities to teach in other countries. And I thought that would be a good idea. So while I was working with my brother-in-law, I took a month off and studied this course. So I passed the course and continued working in England. And then a couple of months later, I was still looking for work in Europe. And I had a series of interviews in London. These are in the international jobs vacancies. There was advertising for jobs in Madrid. So I applied for the jobs and had an interview in London. From that, I had to wait for a couple of months, and then suddenly, I think it was in September, I got a telephone call saying if I could get to Madrid by the next week, there was a job. And I decided to take it. So I moved from Cambridge to Aranjuez in Madrid. That would be, I think, 12 years ago. And I worked there for 9 months. Now that was a complete change, because I went on my own with no family, didn't speak any Spanish, had no idea about Spanish apart from asking for a beer. So I started working there in Madrid. The big problem there, I think, was the paperwork, because when I started there, the school in Aranjuez gave no help with finding the paperwork, so you needed identity cards and other things. So I had to rely on other English people.
Stop, please.
All right, yeah, okay. Right, when I came to Spain about 12 years, it would be in December. So I started work immediately at this school in Aranjuez. Now, I didn't speak any Spanish at all, so I had to rely very much on the boss of the school, who was a Spanish woman, but also spoke English, and other Englishes that were there. For example, that with the perk, from Aranjuez, I had to go into times to try the school help at all, and you just had to wait. I think it took me 4 months to get my identity. That also meant that I couldn't start paying social security until I had the idea. The school was stopping social security, and the idea was that they were going to be back. It turned out they never did. That's all they really did. There for 9 months. As I said, that was one of the problems, was the identity card. The accommodation for me on my own was no problem. It was easy to share with other people, and I could find places in Aranjuez, which is a very nice town. That was no problem. I immediately started having Spanish classes, very basic Spanish classes, and I was getting them almost free through the school. So I started learning Spanish, but that was always a problem for me, because I think once you get over 40, other languages get more and more difficult. So it's not like my students at 10 years old sort of pick up English very quickly, but for me, it's always been a problem, and the accent and everything else. So that's been a big challenge, but I suppose over the years, I just managed to pick it up. So I was there in Aranjuez in Madrid for 9 months, and the idea was I was in Spain for a year, learn Spanish, and then I was going to travel around to South America just to see some of the world, because in England I'd always formed, I'd been to university, I got the job, carried on working, but I thought to do something different. So I was there for 9 months. I went back to England and I worked in a summer school, and then because I still wasn't too decided, so again with the man who gave me the interview in London, he said there was another job in Andújar. So, well, he said it's in Andalusia, so I thought, oh, that must be near the coast. So I came to Andújar thinking it would be near the coast, to be quite honest. So I came here and I thought, well, another year and then we'll see what happens. So I came here and started teaching in Julie El Centro de Inglés. And again, my idea was to stay 1 year and then travel around somewhere else. But this year, that second year, when I was in Andújar, I met my future wife, Maria. So I got to know this lady, Maria. So we started going out together, and we got married 7 years ago, and now we've got a daughter. So all these things meant that I was never going to leave Andújar. I was going to stay here forever. So my dream of seeing the world and speaking Spanish everywhere that's terminated. But I mean, the fact that I'm here, I've got my daughter here and my wife, has meant that I'm very, very happy, and with no desire to go to any other countries now, except with my wife, of course. So that side of it is really settled, much, much better than I would have believed, because I assumed I'd travel the world for a couple of years and then go back to England. But I've ended up staying away, and I would imagine I'll stay forever. I'm actually thinking at the moment of maybe even taking up Spanish nationality, just for some of the paperwork with my daughter. So my daughter could be, if she wanted, she could be Irish, English and Spanish, and have 3 nationalities, which might help for universities and things in the future. Although with the European community, I'm not too sure it will be necessary. So I really don't know. For me, when I came here, the help from the European community, nothing for me. That was 10, 12 years ago. So there was no help. I got no advice, no help from any sort of European Community Foundation. I just relied on friends and people through the school and sort of goodwill to get what you do. And if I have any problems in Andújar, I organise, I solve them through the people at the school, not through the town hall or not through European foundations or anything else. And we do it, and in the school they're very good. We tend to know the ropes. So it's one of the problems is the real pain is the identity card. And the governor of Jaén, he's like only to be cards for. If you're in other communities, after 1 year you can get an identity card for 5 years. Whereas in Jaén, he still likes to give it for 1 year. Then you have to write a special letter, and if you're lucky, you might get an identity card for 3 years. And I even know people who are married to Spanish men or women, and they still only get an identity card for 1 year, which seems ridiculous. Or they have a mortgage in Spain, and they still can only get an identity card for 1 year. So that's just the paperwork here, which is a problem. But I mean, from my point of view, everything's fine. I've got a house, well, I've got a flat here, I've got the mortgage, I've got my wife, I've got my daughter. My family is still in England, and one problem with that now is my mother's very old, which is I've had to go back and see her, I think it's 3 times this year, which is more of a problem. But the good thing is now, because of these cheap flights that you get, and Granada is now quite a good international airport, so you can go to Granada in an hour from here, and I can fly from Granada to London very quickly. So I can actually visit the family for a weekend if I want, which makes things a bit more convenient. So you're not so far away. And everything else, it's fine, to be quite honest. I'll be going back to England for a month this summer with my wife and daughter, so my daughter can practice English, see all the family, and then be back here for another year. In the future, that's it, I think. So I'm quite happy here. No desires to move.